Welcome to the Intuition Incubator. You guys are in for a treat. Today, I have Alan Gompers, who is a nationally recognized author, insightful lecturer, expert on recidivism, mentor to at-risk youth, and beloved authority on meditation and self-actualization. Prior to his startling transformation in prison, Alan's insatiable need for recognition and power drove him to make and lose fortunes on Wall Street, betray family and friends, and become an extraordinary successful real estate developer. Within the forbidding confines of a maximum security prison, he experienced what has eluded him his entire life: perfect freedom and unshakable contentment. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thank you. Well, I don't think we need to say anymore. That about covers it.
Oh, no, I'm not letting you off the hook that easy. I have to tell you, Alan, that when this podcast was in its incubation, I was just thinking about it and getting things ready. I heard you on another podcast and I emailed my producer immediately and I said, you have to get Alan Gompers. Everything he says is the epitome of what I want this podcast to be about. So I have really been looking forward to this interview, and listeners, pull up a chair, get a cup of coffee. This is going to change your life. So let's start. Let's dive in. Can you tell us your story? Tell us how your journey began. What happened?
Okay. Well, before I go into that specifically, I just want to mention that this journey of mine turns out to be a journey that we are all looking forward to at some point in time in this journey called life. And that's to find a sense of freedom, empowerment, joy, happiness, wisdom, and love. And the whole idea behind that, when we get to an enlightened place, a more aware, conscious place, we look to a spiritual dimension in order to take us beyond what we always thought would get there. And so, for me, what has come down through the ages was the power of meditation. And before I go into my specific story, I just wanted to let everybody know that the whole idea behind meditation is not a practice. It's not about crossing your legs and closing your eyes and going to some far off dimension. Meditation, a state of being, is a place of complete wisdom and enlightenment, what the saints call liberation. And it's not about geography. It's not about where you are or what's coming to you or at you. It's about having all of those things in existence and still finding freedom, no matter what they are. So let me just start off with, I've been traveling around the country teaching meditation for many years.
And Alan, before you jump in, I realized that of course I forgot to mention that your whole story is written out in your incredible book, Maximum Security. So I just wanted listeners to know that early on as well. Sorry.
Yeah, Maximum Security, The True Meaning of Freedom is kind of autobiographical, and it gets into detail that I couldn't possibly cover, in our interview today, but I'll try my best to get as much richness into it as I can. But I'd like to start with a letter to give people an idea what is possible in everyone's life. And starts off by saying, "My beloved friends, meditation has revealed so much truth and love in my life, which surrounds me and accompanies me everywhere I go. Everyone talks about love, but what does it really mean? I now realize that love is a practice. It is a great practice, being aware enough to speak. This love is only possible great practice, being very mindful, very focused, very centered, and ultimately very present. I still fall short, but meditating on my heart brings me back. Seeking the highest brings me back. I have had so many hard times all through my life. Many times I have faced the dark hour, and many times I have felt the sublime wisdom, power, and love of my meditation master. I have struggled with a regular meditation practice. Sometimes it is all I can do to sit quietly for 15 minutes a day. But I try always to bring those minutes into my life. The experience of meditation remains. It is always there with me. My message to everyone is this: meditation works, but only if you meditate. I do a lot of reading. I practice staying in my heart. I revere the practice of contemplation. And most of the time, I enter into silence. I have no discipline except this: love and seek the highest. My experience of life has changed utterly. All the suffering I have been through has melted away, because without that suffering, I would never have known love. Without love, I would have never known the great peace and freedom that is there inside me, waiting for me, always, to recognize its presence. I greatly regret any suffering or pain I have caused others, and I will carry that sorrow willingly until the day I die. As for my own suffering, it is nothing. Life is glorious. It is a glorious gift. With all my heart, I thank you. With love, light, and laughter, Carl. On June 11th, some years ago, Paul Chambers was executed on death row in a maximum security prison in Huntsville, Texas, where he had been incarcerated for the past 23 years, right after he wrote this letter.
Wow. Wow.
That is power of meditation. Most people look out at prison as being hell on earth. When we understand what is inside us, the power that we have been given, the divine presence within us, we know that anywhere God's presence.
Yeah.
So
That's not how it started out for you though, right? that I'm just saying. Yeah.
I just wanted to get that across to everybody, that when they hear the word meditation, you can ask, 100 people and you get 100 different, viewpoints.
Yeah.
But meditation is a state of being. It is synonymous with the word God, love, wisdom, joy, whatever the word you want to use. But is the ultimate absolute state of perfect freedom.
Not an action that you take or something that you're doing. It's a state.
That's right.
Yep.
And that is so, so important, especially when I'm going to share my story with you, because that is something that has to be experienced, Abby.
Yes.
It cannot be gotten from a book, from a teacher, from ever. They can all lead to that. It's like walking up to a river. You won't know what it's like to be wet until you jump in.
I love this.
Experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not left brain, right? Which is exactly, what we're talking about here. It's that, how do we find that wisdom? How do we get to wisdom? How do we get wiser instead of more intelligent? Thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, our wisdom is part of our being, part of our truth. It is there. It doesn't go anywhere. It is there all the time. And
Yes.
the reason we don't experience it, and that's the key word, experience,
Mhm.
is because of a little fellow called the mind.
Right.
And when that mind is chattering away, it acts like a block to being able to listen to the divine presence guiding us all the time. It's always there, never
Mhm.
goes anywhere, except that it gets covered up and we get caught up in the drama of what the saints call an illusion, Maya, the world of materiality.
Mhm.
So um, I remember when I was a little boy, maybe about 12 or 13 years old, I found myself alone in my apartment. My parents had gone out, and I started looking around, just seeing what I could find and get in trouble with. And I came across a drawer where my mother kept all kinds of memorabilia and trinkets and what have you, collectibles. And I became curious, and I opened the drawer, and there sitting on top were a whole bunch of black and white pictures. And as I looked closely at the picture on top, it was of a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And his shoulders were bent over. He had the saddest, loneliest look on his face. And as I sat there looking at the picture, tears just welled up in my eyes because I realized that that little boy was me. And I had carried those feelings of despair and loneliness and fear all my life up until that very moment.
Mhm.
And what I discovered as I moved on in my life is that that fear that I saw in the face of that picture that I carried within me as an experience was really a very inspiring is not the word, but it was a very, empowering kind of a word where it got me to want to find out. This was my experience. It made me want to get rid of those feelings that I've been carrying. I didn't even know I had them until I saw the picture. I knew I wasn't happy, but I wasn't, you know, realizing all the time that they were there with me everywhere I went. And so what I did was I made my way out into the world, and the first place that a young kid goes is to hang out with his friends. And we had a playground in the area in the Bronx where I grew up, and the game was basketball. And to be recognized by your peers wasn't about how good looking you were. It wasn't about how much money your parents had. It was about how good your game was. And when I got out there, I wanted so much to be accepted and recognized and to be able to fit in, to end these feelings of depression and loneliness. I thought that maybe, if I was really, really good, something good would happen. And I had my first experience of when
Mm.
when I would play, the competition was about winning.
Right.
And winning came with it a charge of bliss. Everything stopped. I wasn't thinking about pain. I wasn't thinking about depression. I wasn't thinking about being lonely or afraid or anything. All that mattered was getting the ball in the basket and winning whatever we were playing.
Right.
At the end of the day, however, I was in total bliss. And then I had to go home.
Mm.
And the minute I stepped off the court and made my way back to my house, back came the loneliness, the fear, tension, and the depression. And when I got to my house that night, when I went to sleep, I put my head on the pillow and I cried myself to sleep, night after night after night. And so the next day, whenever I could get a chance, I ran back on weekends and after school to be able to get back that feeling again where it erased some of the horrible feelings that I was feeling.
And I like how you put that, Alan. You said it a while back now, but you said these feelings that you said that I carried with me as an experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
It
just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, you know that uh the teaching, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yes.
Well, that word "know" is not relating to the mind, the thought, to the intellect. What the knowing is a deep experience of the truth.
Oh, yes. I love that.
So if you will extrapolate the word "know" and replace it with the word "truth," it would read, "and you shall experience the truth, and that experience will set you free." Because without the experience, you'll never know the truth.
Yeah, you can't get there in the mind. You cannot get there in the mind.
That's right. And that's where most people focus on, success comes out of the intellect. When you are very bright and very smart, so to speak, it's because you have a very, very active intellectual mind, and that is just a fragment of the truth.
Yes.
Not only that, it becomes a block. But when we experience the truth, the mind dissolves back into the heart. It's not there. Just like a wave, when it gets quiet, it merges back into the ocean. A wave doesn't have any reality. It is just water. It is just part of the whole, part of that ocean. And that's a metaphor for life itself. This this life is not anything real. It has an expiration date. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And no matter how much we try to hold on to it, it's dissolving right before our eyes. But the
Yes.
but the but what happens, when we leave the body goes back, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, all of that, back to the earth, because all it is part of the whole underlying reality, which we call the planet. But it is a metaphor, because the only thing that truly exists is an eternal quality called the self, called God, called love, called wisdom, whatever you want. It doesn't go anywhere. It never dies. It is forever. And when we experience it, as my teacher always used to say, and when you experience God, the mind is totally still. When you experience the truth, there is no thought. When the mind gets quiet, what is left is the absolute. What is left is divinity. What is left is the eternal part of who we are.
Yes. Yes. It was so wonderful. So, Alan, I have, my listeners are a little varied. Some of them will know exactly what you're talking about, and then some of them will be like, where are we? So
Well,
bring us through the bring us through that very 3D bodily experience that you had to go through to get to this what you're talking about right now and your deep experience and understanding of it.
yeah, and that's that's what the yogis and the sages and the saints called sadhana, spiritual practice, and enter into the practice of meditation and chanting or whatever most traditions have their basic format for getting to the place of experience. But they all use meditation ultimately, because that's the state we want to get to. So meditation has a practice to it also.
Yep.
Yeah. So at any rate, I remember all my life having experienced a tremendous amount of success. Every hope, every dream, every fantasy I've ever had has always seemed to come true for me. But underneath all this great success were those horrible feelings of loneliness, despair, and fear. And no matter how much money I made, how much recognition and success came my way, these insidious feelings continued to grow inside me, relentlessly, as I grew older. As time went by, I was becoming more depressed and lonely than ever before, and ultimately, I ran out of options, which led me to using drugs, and then actually selling drugs. One day, as I pulled into my driveway, police were there waiting for me. They came pouring out of the woods surrounding my house. Guns were drawn and directed right at me. Police cars pulled up behind me in my driveway, blocking me from moving either direction. In that moment, I felt a hand grab me by the back of my head and threw me down on the hood of the police car. And a voice, Abby, made of stone, said to me, "You are in more trouble than you have ever been in your whole life. Don't move, or I'll splatter your brains all over the hood of this car."
Wow.
I remember in that moment just completely letting go, and I felt the energy just drain out of me, down through my legs and into my feet and into the ground. I was hopelessly, uh, I couldn't move.
Yeah.
The next thing I knew, a hand grabbed me by the back of the neck, door opened to a police car, and I was thrown bodily into the back seat. I was driven downtown to a police station called Manhattan South, which is the next step before prison. And slowly I was driven to a place called Rikers Island, which is one of the most dangerous prisons in New York State. And from there, I spent a year out on the street. And Abby, I can only tell you this. Being out on bail might as well have thrown me into a fire, because it was the scariest time of my whole life. I had no idea what was going to happen. All I knew was I had been arrested and indicted on an A1 felony. Carried a life sentence.
The anticipation of what was going to happen was almost worse than actually having it happen, is what I hear you say.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
I just wanted it to be over, whatever way it was. But it took a year out on bail for me to get to trial. And that's what happened. I went to a 4-day jury trial. And at the end of the 4 days, normally they take, sometimes, many hours or days before they reach a verdict. They came back within a half an hour.
Jeez.
I was convicted and sentenced to 15 years to life.
Oh,
I thought right there that my life was over.
yeah.
And I was taken from the courtroom in handcuffs and shackles by family and friends and loved ones who had come to support me that day with the hope that something magical would happen. They were in shock.
And you married kids at that point? Were you married with kids at that point?
Yes,
Hmm.
I had 4 kids at the time, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
But at any rate, as I was taken out of the courtroom, I was put into a prison bus, handcuffed to the seat, and driven for about 2 hours to a maximum security prison in upstate New York. From there, I was led into a tiny cell, maybe 6 by 9, the size of a small bathroom, with a sink and a toilet and a window. That was it. And a bed, of course, cot, whatever you want to call it. And as they closed the door behind me, I remember sinking to the floor on my knees and I felt the life drain out of me. And I felt as close to death as I ever had in my whole life. Somehow, I made it through the night. And when I woke up the next day, I was sent to the prison yard. 2,000 inmates. The majority of them were lifers, like me, with nothing to lose. Abby, I was scared out of my mind.
Yeah.
I didn't know which way was up. Didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to hold myself, how to walk. I had never been in jail before. I didn't know how to carry myself or how to look to be, vulnerable as I felt. So I saw that there was other side of the yard, there was a building. And I made my way towards it. It was a gym. It was actually a gym building where they had weights and we worked out and basketball court and all of that. And I made my way to the building, and I sat down up against the building, facing, as I looked up, these extraordinary green mountains. And as I saw them, I felt in that moment like it was my mom when I was always afraid when I was a kid. She would come up to me, put her arms around me, and say, "Alan, don't worry, Mommy's here. Everything will be all right." It was like that. And my eyes closed, my legs crossed, and I went into an incredible state of meditation. Now, here's the thing. I had no idea what in the world I was doing. I didn't even know what meditation was. But when I opened my eyes again and I looked around, I saw the gun towers, I saw inmates walking around, and they were looking at me like I was some weird character from another planet. But yet I was sitting there, looking out, and I felt my whole body get light. I felt like I could lift myself right off the ground, and a sense of contentment was welling up inside me.
And this was day one.
Yeah, this is after I came up from, this is day one at the maximum security. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was in horror up until that moment when I opened my eyes, and there I was feeling these extraordinary feelings of freedom and empowerment and contentment and happiness in the midst of what I always thought was the most horrible place in the world to be. My whole life I thought was gone. My wife, I found out, had left and took up with another man. My business got shut. I lost millions of dollars, in monies that I had earned, and my business went down the drain. And I was stuck with 15 years to life. I had 15 years before I'd ever see a parole board, and the rest of my life was owned by New York State.
And yet, literally nothing could get worse. And you had never felt better.
That's right. And that in itself was the miracle.
Yeah.
That I realized that something extraordinary had happened. And like all my life, Abby, every time something good came to me, some success came to me, it never lasted. It was there, it hung out for a while, and then back came all of the pain, the suffering, depression, the loneliness.
And on to the next. You're seeking the next thing to make you feel good again. That's
right. Yeah, and it was money, sex, and rock and roll, if you want to know the truth.
Yep.
And that was all given to me. I never had all I had to do was follow the fear. The fear was driving me. But nothing in the material world could satisfy the pain that I was feeling. Yet when I opened my eyes on the floor of the prison, up against the wall, I had never felt anything as extraordinary as that. The only thing that was concerning me in that moment was this going to last or leave just like everything else in my life?
And that was my next question. How long did that last?
I'm talking to you. Never gone away.
Wow.
I've had ups and downs and things like that, but always underneath it, my meditation master gave me a mantra that would help me to focus and come back to the present moment so that I could reclaim that experience that was there. It was like, when you're driving a car on a highway and the road is clear and smooth, and if you drift off to the side, they have these little, stones or pebbles, whatever they are, that makes a noise when you drive over them to alert you that you've gotten off the road. To make you realize that you need to get back onto the center. And it was like that. I got to a place, Abby, where when something negative or painful came up in my life, I recognized it as an opportunity, not as a punishment. And it was just letting me know that I had gone off into my head again. That had summoned the thoughts in my mind that were distracting me from the experience that was there always waiting for me.
Yeah.
And the best way that I can describe that for you and for your listeners is when I was a little kid, I one of the things that I achieved in my life is I became a singer. I created a group called the Montclairs. We sang the rock and roll, doo-wop rock and roll, and we made records. We had a lot of success, and we did concerts everywhere, and it was a joy. And when I used to go to sleep at night, I had a clock radio, if you remember those.
Yeah.
I set it for the next day to wake me up, and I had a station, um, that I used to play, and it would give me the news or whatever. It would wake me up because it made noise. And one day my father walked into the room and he said, "Alan, would you shut that darn radio off? You're waking up the whole house." And so what I did when he left is I just turned to another station, trying to find something softer and easier on the ear. And then I found this beautiful music that lit up my heart.
Hmm.
And from that point on, it became a part of my life. It was that street corner harmony, that 5-part a cappella harmony called doo-wop rock and roll. And when I first heard it, I just became an addict. I loved it. That's how I began to form the group and get into everything. And but the thing was, what I realized, Abby, was to get to that music, all I had to do was turn the dial on the radio.
Right.
It was a
Yes.
metaphor for turning the dial away from the mind and thought into the heart.
Now, and I always, talk about this, like sometimes we have these events, right, where they are so profound, like the trauma of the event, the shock of being in prison like that, for example, is so profound that the dial, almost changes like without our awareness, it's instant. Something else comes in. But what we also know, right, I'm sure you'll share, is that, we have that opportunity, right, at any moment to shift our attention to that divine that is always there. So help us understand when the mind is just going crazy and we don't have that.
Have you ever watched a horror movie?
I try not to, but yes.
Why are people, especially, well, whatever, why do people get entranced by a horror movie or a scary movie or a frightening movie?
It grabs your attention, right? It's at a journey.
Yeah, think about that for a moment. Well, don't think about it, but just become aware of it. But when you see the monster jump out of the closet, there's a moment where you freak. What happens to the mind in that moment?
It freezes.
It shorts out. You get thrown into the moment.
Yeah.
It becomes an ecstasy, an ecstatic moment. People love to be afraid
Yes.
when it's not, you know, physically imposing on them. But when they get mentally scared to death, it shorts out the mind and the thoughts and throws you into the moment, into the now, into the heart. It doesn't mean that it lasts, because once the monster disappears, you breathe a sigh. But the bottom line is that moment is a moment, an ecstatic moment that I got when I first experienced winning, when I first experienced success, when I first experienced, hitting the lottery and making all kinds of money in business, or meeting my first love. I mean, all of these things short out the mind.
Yeah, and it just shuts down that part of the brain that's thinking. There's no thinking involved. You're just in that
That's
moment.
right. The minute we say thinking, we are trapped.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, once we become aware that it wasn't the horror movie or the money or the sex, rock and roll that caused that,
Yes.
it was the absence of the mind and thought in that moment that drew you to the truth.
Oh, that's so phenomenal, and I think so hard for people to understand because of how we've been conditioned and because of how unconscious the process is, and this belief, that, it's right around the corner. I just got to reach outside of myself for it, whatever it is, and then everything will be okay.
That's right. And uh, I say this with great compassion, sensitivity, and love to the world. But this whole process of discovering the truth, experiencing the truth, uh, has a barometer to it called karma.
Yep.
And if we understand what karma is, it's that everything that happens to us is a result of our own past actions.
I would love it if you would speak to that a little bit, Alan, because karma, of course, is so misunderstood. It's such a catchphrase that people throw around and people
Correct.
don't understand what it really means. I would love if you would explain that a little bit.
Well, it's the same thing of, when we talk about catch-all phrases, meditation is another one of them.
Yes.
How about love? How about God?
Yes, about authenticity. Authenticity. Yeah, all the
Exactly. Most people have an idea, a belief. And what is an idea or belief or a concept?
what? It's your own perception, right?
Thought.
It's a thought. Yes, it's a thought. Right.
It's the mind all over again.
Right.
When we analyze something, it's the mind. When we believe in something, it's the mind. How many times in our lifetimes have our beliefs changed? Our ideas changed.
Yeah.
The universe is constantly changing. There's nothing you can grab onto. It's all an illusion.
Yes.
That's what the scriptures call Maya, illusion.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that exists is the oneness of the universe. Now, it may be difficult for people to hear that, but karma plays a huge part in all of that. And here's what that's all about. It's when we do something and there's thought behind it, it creates a consequence. Newton said when you something falls from a tree to the floor, gravity will cause it to fall. The result of the action of falling to the floor is a consequence of that action. if there was no gravity, nothing would fall.
Right.
Movement is created by an action, and every action, as she said, has an equal and opposite reaction. So that when we think of something, what we're doing is we're creating a consequence. Unless if the mind is active, we're creating a consequence because the mind created it, and the mind's an illusion. So the experience, even though it's momentary, and even though it's ephemeral and temporary, becomes something that replays itself again and again until we wake up and become aware. That's why ultimately the highest form of karma, pain and suffering. The minute we experience pain and suffering, what does the average person do?
Well, they're experiencing all of those emotions. They're trying to make it go away. They're avoiding it. They're thinking about how to solve the problem.
Exactly. And what are they doing?
Thinking.
They're exacerbating it.
They're making it worse, right? And they're putting more energy toward it, and it's creating more consequence.
That's right. And when we take, what we do is, if it's biological, we take a pill.
Right.
And those of us that are aware know that pharmaceuticals are deadly poison.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biology over time is just a trap. You have
Right.
diabetes, you take insulin for life.
Right.
And a holistic community cures it in 3 weeks.
Yeah, and when you think about this, Alan, I'm curious because we are so entranced into that, right? And of course, when you have a major medical problem, this is a little bit of a divergence, but I'm interested in your answer. Of course, when you have a major medical problem, of course, then the doctors talk to you when you're in your biggest state of fear, and you're given your solutions, which are very regimented and whatnot, and it's very hard at that point to do anything different. And we are so entrained into this. When you coming from a place of knowing what you know and looking around and seeing where we are at, as a people, in divisiveness, so far from understanding that we are one, that the power is within and all of those things. And yet I have a sense that you have found a state inside yourself that is not discouraging for you somehow, that doesn't dissuade you or bring you down or frustrate you.
As a matter of fact, just the opposite.
Mm.
It's an inspiration.
Oh, share that, please.
Because when there is pain and suffering, what we do is we try to find ways to end it. Somebody who's enlightened on some level, or somebody who is aware on some level, knows that the pain continues. They need to make a change. That is consciousness.
Yes.
Consciousness will always give you the truth. So that if we're experiencing pain and suffering, there's only one thing, as the Yoga Vasishta says, which is one of the ancient texts of the East, which is my Bible in many ways. It said self-inquiry. It's not give me a pill,
Right.
not help me to get better. What's causing this? Why am I in pain? There's no pill in the world that can end pain and suffering because it never caused it in the first place.
And so when we talk about self-inquiry, because this is another...
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Makes 100% sense to me. And I think the next loophole that happens quite often is when we talk about self-inquiry as being, really the most important thing you could do, like the one thing, right? And yet, it gets all mixed up in this idea, I think, of that's selfish. You know, I'm thinking about, or of course, it's thought that's probably part of the problem is that there's thinking involved. But how do you help people understand that self inquiry and self observation and self remembering and all of these things and paying attention to your inner state is where it's at, as opposed to marching and all of these things that are also part of our lives. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I absolutely do, and for 2024, that is the question, because this is going to sound a little profound or deep or whatever. I don't mean to do that, but in the world we live today, we have to understand that there is no such thing as death. The only thing that dies, if you want to call it death, is the body.
Yes.
The body has an expiration date. It is Maya. It is not real. Nothing in the material universe is real, because the only thing that exists is the self, which we call God or whatever. Understanding, you ask somebody, what is God, or what is the self, or what is the truth, or whatever, and they understand it as the same synonymous definition, then you can go places with that. But if somebody looks at the word God and said, there's some guy out there, and he's controlling the whole deal, if I don't straighten up, you going to hell, or I'm going to experience this, that, and the other thing. And he's supposed to be a God of love, but where is he when I need him? It's because we have wrong understanding.
Mm.
We have no experience. Once I had that experience of freedom, with a life sentence in a maximum security prison, with everything taken away from me, once in horror, 20 minutes later, feeling more free than I ever did in my whole life. I knew there was nothing out there causing it.
Mm.
You knew it was all inside. It had to have been all inside of you because everything had been taken away. It wouldn't have been worse.
That's right. I mean, everything that I thought was causing me to feel pain was still there.
Yeah.
The wall, the prison, the gun towers, the guards, the 15 to life, my wife with another man, business guard, everything was all still there. And yet, I was happier and more at peace than I'd ever been or thought possible.
And so what happened from there?
What's that?
What? Oh, go ahead. Finish your sentence. But I was going to ask, like, what happened from there? I'm sure the listeners are curious, like, because you then went on to serve a senator.
Oh yeah, yeah, amazing. One of the things that I'll share with you is I got back to my cell, and when I came back from that meditation experience in the yard, I come back to my cell lobby, and it's 36 inmates, all lifers. And I come back to my cell, I get locked in, and one of the inmates who was cleaning the hall, he came over to my cell, and he handed me a book through the bars, and it had a picture of Swami Muktananda on the cover. He was a meditation master from India, a guru.
Mm.
And when I held the book in my hands, I dropped to my knees. Then my knees just collapsed. And I dropped to my knees on the floor. And those feelings that I had out in the yard that was so profound and so beautiful, it happened again. And as I sat there, I thanked him. I wasn't even thinking that he thought I was crazy or dropped on the floor or whatever. I just thanked him for the book, and I sat down on the bed, and I began to read. I tell you, I have never read anything quite like that in my life. Every word seemed to have a magical power around it. And as I read the
You
word,
were you were an open vessel at that moment too, right? Like so
well,
much of that is so it's, we can get, I mean, I'm sure I've had the experience certainly where someone gives me a book, which is just tremendous, incredible, but I can't appreciate it until I'm an open vessel. And then one day you pick it up and it's like, oh my gosh, how did I miss all this?
so I know I'm talking to the choir here, thank goodness.
Oh yes, yes. This is for our listeners because this is what I want this is what I want this podcast to be about. I just want this to get out, and I think you're just such a perfect person to do it because of what you've been through and what you teach and how you talk about it and all the things.
Yeah, well, it's all coming from my own inner experience,
The
which I
experience,
know is the truth. I don't care whether people believe what I say or not,
right?
because I know there will be those out there that are ready to hear it, or those who are already hearing it, and hopefully will take them deeper into their journey, into their sadhana.
Yes,
And
plant.
for me, my whole purpose in life is to get meditation and the spiritual component out so people can begin to enrich their lives and move towards freedom.
Yeah.
As I moved through the book a little bit, I came through um, a passage where they called him Baba, where he was saying, the world and everything in it. Check this out, Abby. The world and everything in it has no power over you.
Hmm.
You have to choose to be lonely. You have to choose to be unhappy. You have to choose to be afraid. Nothing or no one is doing anything to you. Everything that happens to you is the result of your own past actions. You are the creator. God dwells within you as you.
Yes, and yes, and would you say, the past actions too have to do because we talked about nothing dies. The past actions can be past life. Your energy goes into a new body, right? And so maybe your
Yeah,
past
but that's all Maya also, because the only thing that exists is the divine, is the self.
Yeah.
Quantum physics, uh, going from Einstein all the way back down to Pike, before he died, he knew through the quantum theory, what wasn't a theory, what his experience to change his whole life, that there was nothing else. As he began to experience the electron microscope, he went to the cell of the. He took a sample of the cell, put it under the microscope, and he found what do you call it? What's the next step down is a
the atom or the nucleus or the
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, going down, he kept going down, and enlarging the cell, and the cell changed into the next step down, because the cell wasn't truly real. It was made up of um oh goodness, Alan Gompers, what happened to you? Anyway, he went down to the point where the cell became an atom,
Yeah.
and the atom broke down into photons and neutrons
yeah.
and smaller particles. And what he found was that those neutrons and protons, they were in a space where they were just a minuscule of the amount of space. But then he
Right.
took it to its depths, and what he found was that even the macro ingredients that he found under the microscope disappeared completely into undulating energy.
Hmm.
And this undulating energy was what created the materiality. It came out of itself. That there was
Right.
nothing else out there to create what we call the world and planets and stars, and we're all made up of that consciousness, that energy. There is no other out there doing it. And that's why Baba all said that you are the creator, because you are the one. Everything is the one. And just like a wave appears on the ocean, the wave is not real. You can find it in a dictionary. You can splash it. But then a few minutes later, it's gone. Back into the ocean. It doesn't lose anything because it never was anything. It was just water all along.
Right. And this grand misunderstanding that consciousness came out of materialism as opposed to
Exactly.
the other way around.
Just the other way around. And
Yeah.
once we understand that, and it takes, awareness and consciousness to do it, because of karma, not everybody is ready. They have to go through the karmic consequences in order to get free of it, so that their consciousness becomes exposed in a way in which they can move with that direction.
Yes. Yeah.
The thing was, when I heard that, what Baba said about you create everything that happens to you, you are the creator. Earlier in the day, if I had heard that, I would have taken the book and thrown it into the garbage can.
Right.
Because how could anybody say that I chose to be in this terrifying situation? Why would I do that?
Yeah.
But then I remembered the experience I had out in the yard. And I realized that all the outer circumstances in my life that had always terrified me were all still there. The life sentence, my wife with another man, the prison wall, the gun towers, and on it went. Yet when I came out of meditation, Abby, I was feeling more content and at peace than I had ever known possible.
Now,
And
Oh, go ahead.
what's that?
I was just going to say that, you then, of course, went on to serve many years. And I'm curious about the lived experience of that, because unless, I'm assuming that you did not feel bliss every single moment of the time that you spent in prison.
Oh, that's beautiful. Because what I discovered, and you're absolutely 100% correct, I didn't always experience that. Prior to that awakening, I would have given up and become a victim again and again and again and again, just like I did when sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and making a basket or whatever it was that I got success from. I knew it was temporary, and I knew it wouldn't last, and I had no trust or faith in it. And so I never relied on it. But now, when that happened, I realized that it was a wake-up call,
Mm-hmm.
that I was being told that what you're experiencing ends with the self, ends with the heart. And to shift the focus, like turning the dial on the radio, from the mind to the heart, was the way out of it. And it
So
was a matter of consciousness.
were there times where that was really hard? Were there times when something happened in the prison or whatever? I mean, this is early on that you had the awakening. And so I imagine throughout the time, there were many experiences that, might have been frightening or scary or uncertain or, staring 15 years down in the face. Were there times where that was hard to find, how do I shift back to that place?
Well, again, it's not about something to do. It's a matter of awareness. And when you have an awakened consciousness, you have understanding and conscious awareness, so that when something happens, you don't react the same way. Um, uh, I just knew deep inside me that when I had that experience, the fear just dropped away, never came back. I've had moments where things started to happen, but I was just, I had a mantra that I got from Baba's book, and I started repeating it. So when something painful or or frightening came up, rather than allowing the drama to pull me in, the mantra was a way in which it brought me back to the moment, and the mind got quiet again.
And what was that?
All the mantra was Om Namah Shivaya,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a conscious mantra that was infused by Muktananda. There's a whole one of, if you want to read about it, his autobiography is compelling. Called Jesus, what's happening to my mind here today? Well, the play of consciousness, it's called
Like kind of.
Swami Muktananda. And what he says is so provocative, but yet it's filled with awareness. You can't help reading his words without having the experience of those words. And that's the experience that sets you free. This is
So-
light being transferring his energy, a Shakti,
Right.
into the reader. You know the word Shakti part? Or how about being born again?
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes for people to look at that book. I'm curious if you could share with us briefly what happened for you when, and listeners, this is a book that you got to read. It's just, there's so much that happens. I mean, I could sit here and talk to Alan, all day about all of the experiences he went through.
It's
But
all in my book.
it's all in the book, but I'd love if you could share what happened for you when you actually were told might get out early.
Oh, that was a snap. That was fun.
You were afraid. You afraid at that time?
Oh well, let me explain that a little bit. Up until that moment in time, once I had that awakening, fear was not present in my life. I felt like being in prison was like being in heaven. It was I just loved everything that my day brought to me, and I became friendly with the inmates and even the guards, and everybody was just they're picking up on it. But uh, what did I want to say? Yeah, I get a call one day, um, and they said the warden wants I get called by the loudspeaker that they called my number, and they told me that the warden wants to see me. And normally, when something is wrong or I do something wrong, that's why the warden wants to see you.
Right.
But I felt totally fine because I had no skeletons in my closet at that time, and so I was I was just curious. I was glad to go and see what he wanted. And when I got there, he's outside his office, and when he sees me, he lights up like a Christmas tree. And he comes running over to me and he says, "Mr. Gompers, so good to see you." He invites me into his office and says, "Please have a seat." And I sat down and I was just very curious, what's going on here? And he looks at me and he says, "You have any idea? You have any idea what I'm about to tell you?" I said, "Absolutely not. I know I have no idea at all." He said, "You've been granted executive clemency by the governor."
And how long had you been in by then, by the way?
A little less than 3 years.
Okay.
And I looked at him, and here's where the money meets the road. He's looking at me, ready for me to jump out of my chair, jump out of my skin, and leap for joy and thank him. And I just sat there, and I looked at him, and I said, "Thank you very much." He couldn't believe it. And as I sat there, I felt good, that something, that was positive and, I could appreciate it. I realized that at some point in time, I'm going to get out of here. Maybe even the next day. I had no idea what it was. So, at that point, I shook hands with him and I headed back to my cell. on the way there, Abby, this feeling of fear just welled right up inside me. I hadn't experienced it since that day in the prison yard. I didn't even know I had it anymore. But there it was, full blown. And I realized that what I was afraid of was that I could be going home the next day. That didn't scare me. What I realized scared me was I didn't want to go. I wanted more time in prison.
Well,
This was an opportunity for me to continue my meditation, my spiritual practices, because I wasn't quite there yet.
yeah.
And I knew I needed more time. I would never have repeated that out loud to anybody. They would have
Right.
thought I had gone off the charts. But the truth was, when I got back to my cell, I had the letter of clemency that the warden had given me, and I opened it, and it said that my 15 to life sentence had been reduced 6 to life. I had been given back 9 years. And then I let out a sigh of relief because I had 3 years in almost, and that would mean that I had 3 more years to go. And I let out a sigh of relief. I felt so extraordinary that the opportunity continued until I got more grounded in that place.
And what I hear, what I'm sort of reading between the lines, what I'm hearing is that if you had gone out, it's so hard, right? With our five senses constantly being bombarded in events of our lives and all of those things. It's challenging to stay in that place of inner stability and inner focus. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that being able, when you say I wasn't ready, it was like I need more time where none of that is going to sway me from this focus that I have
Right.
of self-inquiry. And as crazy as it sounds, being in prison was like a place where you weren't going to have to fight all of the drives and the conditioning and the thinking and all of that stuff that potentially would pop up immediately just by being out in the world.
It felt like being in that prison because of the intimacy of not having to work or job or responsibilities was like being in an ashram. That's just the way I felt about it. You know, as I'm sitting there on my bed after realizing what was going on and feeling really, really good about everything, there was a window in my cell. Of course, it had bars on it, but it overlooked this panoramic. If you saw my book, that picture on the cover, that's what I saw. You have my book, right? The picture on the cover was the exact copy. I mean, the graphic artist who did that cover, it took us 3 takes to get it, but she got it almost 90% what I saw when I was in my cell. And when I would look out through the bars at the beautiful mountains in the distance
Beautiful.
over the wall, it was
Yep.
beautiful. And as I'm sitting there staring at it now, after I had that experience with the letter, I hear a voice come up inside me. And what it said was, Alan, it's not about getting out. It's about getting free. And you're not there yet. Behind these walls, you can hear my voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I've had that experience before in meditation. Particularly, sometimes it happens like if I've had trouble dragging myself into meditation for, let's say, a couple of weeks or some time or whatever, and I finally, get back in there. And then I have that experience where I'm like, why did I ever leave here? Like, this is such a great spot. There's so much safety inside, you know? And that's kind of, I don't know, that's what I'm associating to as you talk about that. which is very different than the experience of meditation I think that many people have, where you're just your mind's just going and you're sitting there quietly while you're thinking, which is not meditation. Would you agree?
It's not. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So I want to get to a point where you have, well, I've got some questions because I want to give our listeners some tips and advice. But before I go there, what I really would love to know is, the show's called the Intuition Incubator, and I call it that for a specific reason because we are so cut off from that divinity that's inside and from our intuition because we are so over, left brain dominantly obsessed, that I feel like we need an incubator to nurture this part of ourselves back into life. And I would love to know your understanding of intuition and how it plays into all of this.
Intuition is something that comes up beyond the mind. When you intuit something, it's a conscious awareness that bubbles up, and you're not thinking. Intuition is not a thought. Intuition is a time and space where you're getting guidance from within. To be able to hold on to that, we have to always remember to drop the object. And once we have an experience of that intuition or that guidance, what we need to do is to continue to remember the experience and drop the object we thought created it.
Meaning the person or the event or the whatever. Yep.
No, again, nobody can give it to us. That's the whole point here. We keep striving out in the world for the world to give us something that will last, and it can. It's dying as we're holding it in our hands.
Right.
The minute we think we have something that's lasting, it's dissolving.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's got an expiration date.
Aniche, everything is always, it's impermanent.
That's right. But what's not impermanent is the experience of that. So we have a choice always. That's why we have free will, and we get it. The more we have free will, the more we've worked through karma. Because karma has lessened its hold on us. The things that created our fear and our sensitivity and our anger and whatever is constantly trying to bring us back into the drama. But the minute we are conscious, we break the chains of karma. It loses its hold on us.
Yes, and this, yeah. Go ahead. Well, it leads me to my next question because, again, and I have two questions. One is for, different audiences, because like I said, I have two different audiences in a way. One thing that we are habituated into, and certainly a lot of the, meditation practices are designed around, is this sense of manifestation. Right? Like when we get to that place that we are vibrating at the right frequency and like attracts like in the quantum field. And if we get there, then we can get the stuff we want. Right? And so people get very caught up in that. And
Another trap.
Exactly. And I'd love for you to speak to this because it can be very disheartening for people to say, well, what do you mean? I'm just going to observe myself just to observe myself? Like, why would I do that? Like, what am I going to get out of it? Right?
Well, my question always to clients and to when I do workshops and stuff like that is, what is it that you think you have that you want to hold on to? Are you totally happy and at peace in your life and you don't want or need anything more? If that's the case, you're in a good place.
But what about when they're reaching for something? They want to create money. They want whatever they think is going to bring them freedom. They want the job, the partner, the blah, blah, blah.
And remember Buddha, his famous saying, his teaching? desire for suffering.
Mm.
The
Yeah, but
minute
then
we
the
want
other
something,
side of that, Alan, people are going to say, well, so what do I do? Just not desire anything? Do I just sit like a blob on the couch and never create anything in my life? Right? That's what people are going to.
well, not everybody's going to hear it,
Yep.
but there will be like we're talking now. You hear it.
Yep.
I mean, you may have difficulty in working it, but you're on the path. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
When somebody is saying to me, "Oh, that I don't really, I'm not, I'm not there. Blah blah blah." I mean, there's a closed door. We don't
Yeah.
go to a closed door. We have no right to you know force anybody to do anything they're not ready to do. Otherwise, it will push them further away. What we have a right to do is to put out our truth and then allow everything to decide whether it wants it or not. That's freedom. All I can do is offer my love, my heart, by whatever I understand to be true. I don't mean that it's everything, but what somebody does with it is up to them, not me. That's
So
why I love an individual audience. I love being in front of an audience because I'm just giving, and people
Yep.
in the audience are either taking or not, but that's
Yes.
their choice.
Yes.
How
Yep.
much do I want to be free? Man, when I had that experience of freedom, you can't give me anything else.
Yeah.
You can't shower me with sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, power, recognition, fame, fortune. I don't need any of it because I already have everything that I could ever want.
Yeah.
Total freedom, eternal life.
So for people that are newer on the journey, like they are not experienced meditators or whatnot, but they
Read the
they
book.
like what you're
Read my
saying.
book.
Read your book. Okay, that's
Read
the
my
first.
book. So yeah, we have some film companies that have wanting to make a movie out of it. I kind of like held back on that because I want to feel that the person who's doing it is for all the right reasons.
Yeah. Well, that which makes
I would not go with anybody who wants to edit it or make it, into a Hollywood, thing.
Yeah.
Well, I want to try to alert people to what is possible and bring meditation and consciousness to as many people as Shakti will allow me to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So where, and I'll put all this in the show notes as well, but where where can people find you?
I have a simple, uh, website called alangompers.com. That should be easy to remember. And I also do I do consultation sessions with people if they want to sign up with that. Well, with me, we can do it on the phone, or if they live nearby, they can come. But I do a lot of that. I don't travel as much as I used to anymore.
Yep.
But I do have a lot of sessions with people and clients, and that's very rewarding for me because people come because they really want um, a different experience in life, and yeah, they're ready to move on. This life is going to disappoint you over and over. I don't care how many lifetimes you want to believe exist, but there's going to come a point where being frustrated and in pain and suffering and without any sense of freedom is going to reach a point where you're going to want something else. That's the way the dance is designed. The universe is benevolent. It doesn't leave anything out because it is everything. Positive and negative don't exist because that creates duality and there is no such thing. If
Yeah.
we believe that there's such a thing as good and bad, as Shakespeare said, he said, watch out, thinking makes it so.
Right. It's neutral force then. Is that how you would say that?
It's all one. There is no other.
Yeah.
So when you experience grace, when you experience love, there's no thought.
No.
There's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
You got
Right.
you got a better experience than love, joy, freedom? You got one?
Nope.
Why would I ever want that? I'd rather be out there making a couple of bucks. I mean, when we say that, it's disingenuous because
Yeah.
people have not had the experience of real happiness.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this, as I said, for a long time. Any final words for our audience before we go?
Yeah, my words to everybody is this. You are all one with the creation,
Yeah.
and that creation is eternal. It never ends. And the experience of the self, that what we call God, is love. If anybody has a better consequence to their life than love, let me know. I'll join you. But the bottom line is, everything else is a contraction of that, what we call illusion. Like I love to use the example of the wave on the ocean. You ask anybody if they believe a wave is real.
Hmm.
I'll end it with this, my dear. I'm sitting on the beach with my granddaughter, Brittany, some years ago. And we're looking out at the ocean, and it's a beautiful day. And there's some gentle waves breaking, gently on the ocean. And I just said to her, I said, "Sweetheart, what is that?" And I'm pointing at the wave, and she goes, "Oh, that's a wave, Grandpa." I go, "Well, really?" "No, it's not." And her face got really curled up in, confusion.
Yeah.
I said, "What do you think that is?" He says, "It's a wave." "No, it's not." And then, I didn't want to keep it hanging out there. I said, "What you're looking at is not there anymore. Where'd it go?" "I don't know. It went back into the ocean. You know why?" Because all it was an illusion. It was just water. It didn't lose anything by going back into the ocean. It just merged into that oneness. It was always water all along. There is no such thing, a wave. There is no such thing other than the ocean. The ocean is everything.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And, to this day, when, now she's like, what, I don't know, 20 years later,
Yeah.
she always kids me about that moment. She always says, "How you doing with the waves, Grandpa?" I said, "I'm trying to forget that they exist." Is what I tell her.
Oh my gosh, thank you so very much. Listeners, don't walk, run to go get Alan's book, Maximum Security. I'll have all of that in the show notes.
Yes, the maximum security, the true meaning of freedom. And if anybody wants to order the book, I can get them a signed copy.
Oh, phenomenal. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. Uh,
No, it was a joy to do this interview with you, Abby. You've just got great energy, a lot of shakti, and you're doing God's work.
Thank you so much, Alan.